that space, I want to set a foundation in soybean production and see if there's some commonality here, and then some differences, right? I alluded to some of these earlier, but within this space, if you're looking at, soybean management, intense management of soybeans, and the idea of, getting the most profit, most production out of that, what is your starting point, right? So we've got here, let's see if the answer works. All right, we'll get to that one. All right, so yield. All right, so what are the things that you're doing? What are the things these are the top things that I want to make sure I hit in terms of soybean production, all right? So to get your yield, to get your profit and production, what are some of your top choices? Just general categories.
Plant early.
Plant early. Henry's all right on the board there. Okay, what's early? It's all relative, right? Early May, early June, early April, right? No, yeah, I know where I'm at, guys. Frost seeding is what it's about, right? All right, so plant early, plant timely is how I like to couch that. Okay, what else? Genetics, yeah, you got to have the genetic potential. Clearly, you've got to have that, so then you can move the bar. Okay, so you got timely plant, you got genetics. Let's see, you got variety selection, timely plant. You got the top two already. Okay, what else? Weather, right? We can't control that, but in the end, we can try to manage for it as best we can. Okay, what else? Pest management, right? You can start to click through these, right? These are the standards. And obviously, I know that some of this gets changed a little bit whenever you bring a white mold into this conversation, right? I had narrow rows within here, less than 30. So, okay, that might change a little bit if you got some white mold. So again, caveats there. And you get into the next set, okay, we have to contend a lot with soybean cyst nematode, right? That's a big pest for us, right? And we have populations that are shifting, right? So then if we look at a source of genetic resistance, it's failing us. We have to switch. So instead of a PI 8788, we're having to go to P-Kings, and we're going to have to alternate back and forth. So cyst nematode's a big one for us. Weed control pests, that's a big one. Do you guys have any glyphosate-resistant weeds up here? You don't? What are you doing? Teach me. Yesterday morning, I was in northern Indiana, I did a field day there, and we're talking just water hemps eating us up. Right? I get phone calls, I get text messages, Shaun, what can I do? The beans at R3, water hemp's just taking us out. Can I spray? Well, you can. Whether you should, that's the call, right? That's off-label, right? But if you've got this opportunity to take out the water hemp that's resistant, and you can have no yield loss to 20%, that's a gut call, right? You're trying to manage that farm overall, try to get that weed control down. That's a huge part of our world as well. Disease, insects, clearly, white mold, we talked about that. Bean leaf beetle, green stink bug, those are coming in to hit us. What are some of do you have many insects of note? What are the ones that are an issue for you guys? Maybe you're glorious in that way, you don't have to deal with bugs. What are some of the insects that you deal with? Aphids, right? I walked 20 fields already, seeing that. Aphids a huge part of that. Okay? Spider mites, so when it turns dry, right? So not with the weather you've had this year. We're taking care of white mold and spider mites for you. All this extra rain, right? You're welcome. Continue on there. Scouting, just to know what that crop looks like, okay? To really be in tune with it. Growing up, I grew up in Illinois. I'm an Illinois farm boy. And we raised corn and soybeans, a little bit of alfalfa for the cattle and everything else. And, growing up in the Midwest, in the United States, you plant corn, and then as long as we got the beans in the ground by Memorial Day, that's the last week of May usually, right? We were fine. Well, that mentality has definitely changed. In these years that I've been at Purdue, in other words, you look at this combination and say, I've got to manage them intentionally. I have to be purposeful in that. I think there's a lot of yield potential that comes into there. I think there's a lot of profit that comes into that point, okay? The answer's kind of wigging out on me. Fertility, all right, nutrients. This is a big one for me that have a good underlying fertility. So whether it's through the phosphorus, potassium corridor, the sulfur that I talked a little bit about, getting the pH right for the greater rhizobium, all that has to come into play. You've got to set the stage. This goes back to the Mo's point, all right? The idea, okay, then you have to put all that in context of what do you get on the weather? What kind of soil do you run? Okay, so do you run a prairie soil? Do you run a sand? Do you run, okay, this thing's just going to be nasty, wet all the time, but I've got to put tile every 20 feet, right? You're managing that, right? So all that to say, to set this foundation about being intentional, right? All right, so that's the name game. Not just, you throw it out there and you get these yields, right? That just doesn't happen. Now, we're planting timely. All right, a lot of our growers will go out and we'll plant soybeans now. The story has definitely been heard, and that message is loud and clear. All right, we're planting beans timely. They're probably some of the first things that go out in most cases. I'll show some interesting data on that. They can withstand some crazy, cruddy conditions, right? The idea that you're getting them out into this marginal soils, I don't like it, but they can adapt, right? How do soybeans adapt? Branching, right? You think about that. You think about the ability to have their potting throughout, flowering throughout the season, potting throughout there, so they can adapt in that way, right? So here's a quick take-homes on that and to continue going on. Let's see if I get up here. I think I'm going to fall off if I go high. Maybe. All right, foundations and then expand, right? So when we look at variety selection alone, in our data, that's at least a 6 to 12 bushel swing, okay, just on the genetic potential, okay? So doing your homework in terms of whether Omafra, or you think about some of the seed companies that are in here, okay, how well do they perform over a number of environments, right? Is there interactions? Is there some place of intense management with that? There's some interesting comments made there. All right, again, these are foundational. For us in the Midwest, you know, narrow rows, again, caveats here, right? We get a yield advantage with those narrow rows, 15s in particular, those that we're talking about, the row crop units, not necessarily a drill. I mean, again, I grew up with that. I was talking to a gentleman earlier. You know, how do you know when you have a drill set right? How I knew when I had the drill set right is when I saw a few soybeans on top of the ground and then some down below. When I didn't see any soybeans on top of the ground, I knew I set that drill too deep, right? So, I mean, it's about knowing your equipment, knowing your setup. That's all part of this, right? So this idea of row spacing out, we want to harvest sunlight. That's a big part of it. You think about a compressed growing season, what you guys have versus what we have. I think that's a major part of this is, okay, what can we do to harvest as much sunlight as possible by the time we're starting to flower and then transition into full pod development and seed fill. Okay, narrow rows for us gets us there. That modified narrows is a place I really like to be. You don't have to necessarily be a drill. The other point I make here, we've done intense management studies in combination, those with 30-inch rows versus those in 15s. And a lot of people like to do the 30s back when I started and say, oh yeah, then we can run the sprayer through, not get any wheel track damage. And then what ends up happening, there's just not as much yield advantage. We lose out 5 to 10% yield advantage. We don't have the white mold as bad as you guys, so hear that, right? We gain more in our intense management when we're on narrow rows, or 15s, 20s, twin 30s, whatever it is, okay? So even with wheel track damage on the sprayer, okay? Plant stand, so for us, again, these are the foundations, move forward. If we're on 100, 120,000 plants, we're more than enough. That's even got some flex in it. I'm going to show you some slides in a little bit. If I've got 85,000 plants, that's more than enough, okay? Then you think about an environment, that's going to have higher plant populations. What does that introduce for us? More opportunities for disease to come in, right? Now, if that's a management for the weed side of it, okay, well, that's fine. We can work through that. But we can be efficient with the number of seeds that we have out there, the number of plants we have out there. Do we have to have a picket row? We don't have to. I prefer it, so then we have uniform emergence, uniform plants, right? I'm not thinking about the corn that's okay. If you're off a couple days, I mean, those ear sizes are off as well. Soybeans, they're going to adapt, right? They're going to have that flex to it, but I would prefer to have a little bit more uniform stand if possible. Timely planting, again, I'm going to get into these a little bit. You know, a lot of us, again, growing up in the Midwest, are like, oh, as long as it's in late May, we're fine. There's a 4 to 8 bushel difference easy. Okay, usually we're about half of a bushel per acre per day when we delay beyond the first week of May. So a 10-day delay is easy, 5 bushel. There's cases that's 10, 15 bushels. Okay, I want to get into the whys of that in a little bit. Solid foundation, so we have plants that are established, have good root systems so they can access nutrients. Okay, so these are all foundation, right? These are things that we're striving for. Let's dive into a little bit of those. So within plant stands, right? I've done 60 site years field scale trials where we've done these seed rate responses, and so let's see if I got a laser that actually works on here. Is that the middle one? Nope. All right, I can jump a little bit. So if we have an early stand 100,000 plants by harvest, we have 87,000 plants, 100% yield potential. Early on, when we're doing counts in June, if we have 85,000 plants in June, we still have 95% of our yield potential. Okay, Okay, so again, that foundation. We don't have to have gobs and gobs of plants. In fact, I'd say if we've got too many, we're going to have an introduction of those other issues that occur. Let the plant be efficient, okay? If you have too many plants out there, what do a crowded soybean look like? Are they short or tall? They're tall, they're rank, they're gangly, right? You want a compact plant, all right? I do not want a soybean that's up to my chest. I do not want that. That's a lot of biomass. That's a lot of introduction in terms of disease. That's a lot of energy wasted. A lot of energy wasted in just biomass production. We have to be efficient, okay? So how many layers of leaves do you need to optimize yield? In other words, if you've got this 1 square meter area, right? I'd always debate if I talk English units or metric up here. You guys talk bushels, you talk pounds. I don't know which is right. So this 1 square yard, right? I'm going to confuse the heck out of you guys. Out of each layer, right? How many layers of leaves do you need over that 1 square meter to optimize yield? 1? You better say no. 2? I'm going to get the auctioneer hat on again. 3? It's too bad you guys already got dessert. Because I was going to keep you from eating dessert. How many can we go up to? You can go up to 6 or 7 layers of leaves. All right, so do you need 6 or 7 layers of leaves per ground area? No. Okay? If you're efficient, we're talking about 4, all right? 4 to 5. Now, does that mean if we get 6 or 7 that, it's all lost? No. It's just about we can be efficient. That plant can be efficient in harvesting sunlight, those 3.5, 4 layers of leaves. Physiologically, it's called leaf area index. Okay? So that's what we're talking about. If you can be efficient in that leaf area, then you can transition into biomass that's into your pod production. Because you get paid on seeds, not on leaf biomass. Okay? So that's what we're trying to do with this. The timely planting is going to come into play. This seed rate comes into there. So agronomically, we'll get in this. So what I have on planters, so whether that's going to be a vacuum, whether that's finger, whatever it is, 15 to 30s, assuming 90% germ lot, right, we're at 140,000, kind of industry standard, but the data that backs up with this. What's interesting about this, and maybe you don't know this, but early season stands, we come into 105,000, we end at 85,000. We have establishment rate about 75%, okay? So this kind of hurts a little bit when you think about it, but it's interesting as you kind of work through, okay, of the 140,000, including the 10% that are already dead, right? That's germ lots 90%. We're going to establish 75% in total. And then, oh, by the way, when you took June counts, you're going to lose another 15%. So you're going to go over to Henry and everyone else that's selling you the seeds. Like, why in the world did I lose 10 to 15,000 soybean plants? Why? It's self-selection. Survival of the fittest. All right? So it's literally picking out the winners and the losers amongst that community. All right? So if you look at this, if I've wasted an investment into too many plants early, you're going to lose a lot of them. You're going to lose even more. So you've wasted water, you've wasted nutrients, you've wasted what? Sunlight, right? So there's yield lost in that way. The other side, on another one, what's interesting, drills. Again, I grew up with this, so I can kind of cut it down as I see fit. Someone said it's a semi-controlled spill. There's nothing controlled about a drill. Okay, but in that, going into it that you got to have seed on top of the ground, because then you got some that's seeded right where it's supposed to be, and then some's down to China, right? Within that, you've got, okay, my recommendation out of our data, 175,000 seeds, okay? What really just kind of hurts you a little bit is whenever you look at establishment rate. Of those 175,000, 60% establish. Boy, if I'm selling seed, that's nice, right? But that is remarkable. All right, 60%. So here's an interesting story of this. Early stands, so they're 115,000 average, these field scale trials. We lose more. We lose 25% of those plants from the June stand count to October. So we're losing plants, right, in that, but we're losing even more. Any ideas why? When you go out to do stand counts in June, or when you send the scout out there to do stand counts in June, what's the growth stages like in a drilled field? Variable? That's an understatement. right? There's going to be some that are just emerging, some that are VC, some are V1, some are V3. They're all over the board, right? Why are they all over the board? Distribution, seed depth, you got hairpinning, right? You got corn residue that's gotten in the way. All of that comes into play, right? So then that variability, that high seed rate's part of that. And then now, whenever you play the game of who's stronger, who's not, guess what? The delayed emergers are going to be the ones that get choked out, right? So we lose out on 25% of those. All right, so that kind of goes into this idea of that plant stand establishment, right? My cutesy thing, I am curious about this one. I haven't asked this one before. So I grew up, Grandpa would always say that we needed corn knee-high by the 4th of July. Does that transcend? Does that go over to Connecticut? All right, it does, right? So I don't like it, right? I want corn tasseling by the 4th of July is what I always told Grandpa. But I switched it. I switched it on the soybean front. We want them green to the eye by the 4th of July. So what I mean by that is we want those suckers canopied by the 4th of July, all right? Again, it's about harvesting sunlight by the point that you've transitioned through just that vegetative growth into flowering. So that now you harvest sunlight, you're putting into the plant that's starting to do what for you? Produce the pods and the seeds, right? If it's flowering, okay, and sunlight's hitting the ground, you're losing out on what? That energy, right? Your job is to manufacture, harvest that, right, and transfer that over. All right, so green to the eye by the 4th of July. Again, I know I'm feathering this line with canopy closure and white mold. I know I am, so I understand that. But when you look at a 15 versus a 30, everything else is equal, same number of plants per acre. We're closing the road 25 days faster with the 15. 25 days. Now again, if white mold's the major contender, I hear you, and then let's work through that, and that's just the reality of what you live with, right? But 25 days. Well, it's interesting. I was actually doing homework. Yes, I was actually doing some homework. I looked at some omaphrida data. I looked at some horse data. And what was interesting on some of those, they have the same data, that 25 days faster. 15 closes the road 25 days faster. This is Indiana data. Yes, sir.
How many percentage in Indiana are 15-inch rows versus 30?
All right, so the question was, what's Indiana's split? All right, so we're less than 10% on 30s. We're about, we're probably on the order of, we've got out of the drills in that case. We're probably going to be more like the 60% on 15s, and then the remaining's got a little bit of drill. Okay. Yep, yes, sir. Yep. Great question. He's talking about seeding rates with 140 on work ground versus no-till. So there is just a touch. I'm going to get it. I think it was John, if I remember your name. Right? I think that we saw that we do need a touch more on our no-till ground. Just a touch. I didn't have enough data to split it. I mean, 60 trials is a good number of trials, but I didn't have enough to feel comfortable. It's like, this is all my no-till, this is all my work ground. I'd say it's about a 10% difference, so we probably need about 10% more, right, to get that on that no-till ground. Good question. Higher seeding rate, yep.
That's what you want.
Yeah, on the no-till ground, it tends to be a little bit cooler, wetter. That's what we've got to contend with. Okay. All right, I already hit that one. All right, so wasted space. The other part of this on the 30s and the wasted space is also think about, okay, sunlight getting in there. We got more, what, weeds developing, germinating, pushing through. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to manage in overall foundational soybean management as well as weeds and yield, okay? Timely planting. This is an hour talk in its own right, all right? It is a huge issue. I think Henry already hit it. This has been around for a number of years. But this one, what is going on? We have switched the mentality. You have switched the mentality. Or we're planting timely. Soybeans respond to what in terms of the way they grow and develop? Temperature, so heat units, as well as photo period, right? Photo, you said sunlight, but that's not it. It's photo period, right? And there's a special little nuance to that. If it was sunlight, all right, those soybeans around whatever interstate, whatever major road that's got a billboard that's got light on it, right? Those would mature. But that light, I don't know if you've got that, maybe it's just Indiana, right? You've got a light on the billboard and soybeans planted around it. Do those soybeans mature at the same rate? No. The light is breaking up the night length. Okay, that's what it actually responds to. Photo period is the length of the night. It's not your day length. We talk about it that way. It's really the night length. So your job is to trick it, okay? We're tricking it by planting earlier. I call it timely. So then we can accumulate more heat units. So when we accumulate more heat units before that critical photo period, we have more nodal development. So where the trifoliates attach, that's what we're trying to advance. So instead of going, we average about an 18 noded plant, 18 trifoliate nodes. All right, now I'm trying to go up to 20, 22. I've gone up to 24 noded plants. Same variety planted April 25th as May 25th. I go from a 24 noded plant down to an 18. Right? You think they're, and again, yeah, the numbers can be different here, but the concept's the exact same. If you go from, hey, I would love to get an 18 noded plant. I would love to get a 20 noded plant. Well, that is certainly better than getting a 14 noded plant, right? That opportunity for those pods to develop on the main stem. That's one of the key things that you look at with timely planting. All right, so nodes, pod production, that's followed right in line. You have more nodes, there's more opportunity for the main stem pods, okay? And then also you look at reproductive branches, all right? This is a big one, all right? Whenever you plant early, or earlier than used to, right? If it's late April, which that might be a stretch up here, by May 1, May 2, May 3, May 5, right? That certainly pushes you guys, right? How fast are those soybeans growing? They're not, right? They're sitting there. Once they emerge, how fast are they growing? They're growing slow, right? Our beans are doing the exact same thing. They can be a April 25th, they can be a May 5th, right? I've got those beans this year that are growing slow, all right? That's fine. They're growing. They're up above the ground. When you look at the internodal elongation, right, that's the distance between each leaf as it goes up the stem. I call it, they're going to be stacked, right? Those lower ones are going to be within a quarter of an inch, half an inch. Okay, what is that, 1 centimeter, right? Gets you there, right? Right, that gets you there. When they're that tight, right, BC, B1, so I'm talking cotyledons, unifoliates, fully expanded. That's 2 inches tall. Don't talk to me about what that is. Was that 5? No, that's not 5 centimeters, that's 5 centimeters, right? So when they're that tall, they're already making the decision to branch. BC, as early as BC. You know how? It's about sunlight, okay? When there's more sunlight penetrating all around that plant, okay, it's a shorter plant, maybe less plant, it says, ooh, I am not being shaded. There means that there's more light around me. I can extend out. So when you plant timely, that are growing slow, but there's triggers. It's about red light, far red light ratios, right? That's a fun thing, right? So it's about, is it shaded or not? If they sense more plants, they're shading, they're going to say, I'm going to grow taller. If they're not getting shaded, guess what? I'm going to go out. In particular branches. And branches that actually provide pods later in the season. Okay, so this timely planting thing, yeah, I think you got it, you've seen it, but here's some of the whys. You get more nodal development, you get more reproductive branches. In doing that, you get these more reproductive branches, it's going to be a compact plant again, right? What are you guys contending with? You got a lot of canopy, there's some disease that comes in. Boy, I want a compact plant. Now, I want that too, regardless of light mold, regardless of any other disease, because it's an efficient plant. Okay, that's what timely planting does for us. Canopy closure, right? Again, I want it green to the eye by the 4th of July. There's also more. We have more reproduction duration. In other words, we're reaching this point faster. So maybe the next couple slides get us there. I say, late April, early May for us in the I states. You can certainly just be early May. What do you think about here? I've already made the comment upwards of 0.5 of a bushel per acre per day. So here's hours of sunlight. This is just some of our northern location versus southern location in Indiana. The concept's the same, right? The idea that we're trying to harvest as much sunlight as possible. So here's a May 7th planted bean. When did it reach R1, right? That idea is green to the eye by the 4th of July. That gets us pretty close there. That's almost the point where we maximize our number of hours of sunlight. So we can harvest as much sunlight as possible, make that into plant sugars, right? Continue to grow and develop. And then you push on, there's R3, and then you get it in maturity at the end of the season, right? So that's May 7th. You kind of walk you through. May 22nd, June 4th. Keep on going. Maybe this thing will work, right? You know, this gets pushed over and over, okay? Some people have the mistake that they say soybeans respond to photoperiod, and that's it. If soybean responded to photoperiod, every one of those 5 planting dates would flower at the exact same time. They don't. It's photoperiod and heat unit. So you trick it, so you get more heat unit accumulation, more nodal development. Again, I'm repeating that. And then also the time from R1 to R7, that's a longer window. So it's maybe 55 or 58 days of harvesting sunlight and producing flowers and producing pods, okay? Versus now we go 22nd of May, or we go to the 4th of June, we kind of fall off the cliff a little bit. Now we're only 54 days, 52 days. That may not seem like a big difference, but if you have 3 days less, that's one. And are those 3 days the same when you look at a May 7th versus May 22nd? The hours of sunlight are totally different, right? A calendar day is not the same. The number of heat units are not the same. So you're trying to get all of that. During this linear phase of seed fill, so R4 to R5, R6, where we're all at right now, okay, within our data, on a normal, just average crop, we're packing on 3 bushels per acre per day. So hear that number again. 3 bushels per acre per day during this linear phase of seed fill. R5 to R6, this is very intensive point. Okay? So if we're 3 days shorter on seed fill, what's our yield difference? 3 times 3, boys. 9, right? So again, it's some of this math that comes into play, right? We have a compressed growing season. You don't have as much. You don't have the nodal development. All that comes into play, okay? Just to back up beyond this research, but then within our state level yields, right? So here's our 5-year trend, right? This is when we plant half our crops planted by May 20th. Yes, May 20th. I want it to be well beyond that. But that's our average at Indiana level. Here's 3 years, our 1988, 91, and 2012. I think it's probably already in the slides, but guess what those years were for us? Fastest planting on record, but also our drought years. I believe 2012 was a pretty dry year for you as well, right? So just because you plant early, does that mean you get the highest yield? No, but it's part of the foundation, because here, take a look at these guys. 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2023 were also our fastest planting on record. All right, here's how they ended up. 88, 91, 12, we were 3 to 30% off our yield trend. 2018, we were 9% above. 2020, 10.5%. 21, 10.5%. So we broke record in 2018, 2020, 21. So at the state level, 57.5, 59, 59.5. Last year, 61 bushels, state level average. Okay, timely planted crop last year. This year, again, we've got a pretty good timely planted crop. We're forecasted at 62 bushels at the state level. Okay, so timely planting is huge. Okay, I just share this. I don't want you to look at all this, but the point I want you to look is go down. We got, okay, days after corn, this mentality of what we had in the Midwest. So 2010 to 17, we averaged probably 10 to 14 days after corn. You plant the corn, and then we get into the beans. And then all of a sudden, there's like this market shift, like people started listening. In 2018, we're within 4 days of corn. We averaged 5 days, within 4 to 5 days in the last 5 years. 2018, 2020, 21, state record yields. Seen the trend there, right? And then now, 22, 23, we're within a day. Okay? There has been a market change at our state level, and I think our yields are seeing that as well. Okay, does that make sense? Again, not to belabor too much, but I think it's a huge part. All right, so I'm really curious about this one. Did you guys ever have the Oregon Trail up here? Probably not, because this has got to be an American thing. It's about going west in the U.S., going west. And so Oregon Trail is an old computer game, and so we played it back in 5th grade and all these kind of things. This is when you had a tandy. You don't even know what a tandy is, right? The green screen, right? I couldn't even find an image. They actually brought color, right? It was just black with green. So at any rate, you're playing this game, you're trying to go west, and the idea is not die, right? And you're trying to survive and go to the Great West, and so you hoped you just didn't die of dysentery, right? That's what they would tell us. All right, so this idea, we're going to the new frontier. So I'm finally transitioning to maybe some new topics, okay? So that's what I'm driving at. Here's a fun one about where things really got going in terms of the U.S. going west. That's when the real adventure was, when we went west. So maybe these are some of your souls. You look at this old Model T and you think about how ruddy that is. Okay, let's go to somewhere new. Let's advance and get into this crop. So clearly I've talked about this a little bit this morning already. All right, about sulfur. You can ask me any questions. I've been at it since 2015, 16 with every iteration of the sulfur trial and management. So I can get into any of that you want. I'm going to hit a few things today just to have some more clarity. But if you have questions about sources, timing, rates, interactions, what not to do, I've got plenty of those, okay? So let's get into it. All right, intense management strategy. So, all right, so why is this now becoming a deal, right? This Clean Air Act that we had in 1990, I'm guessing Canada had it probably before us, right? You guys are very ahead of the curve in that way, trying to do good by the world, right? We drag our feet. So by 1990, we're trying to get into this space of like, okay, it's clean up there. We're getting depositions that are going to be around 15 to 20 pounds, maybe about 12 back in the 2000s. Okay, and once we finally clean up our air, we're no longer repainting our trucks every 3 years because of acid rain, right? We're coming into this, now we're less than 3 or 4 pounds, okay, of sulfur being deposited every year. Okay, so we have less being deposited, that's one. All right, so how much does that soybean crop need? It is hungry. It is a huge one. I talked about earlier about how much nitrogen this crop takes. It needs a lot of sulfur as well. Okay, so if you were to look at the 75 bushel crop, let's start at 50. 50 bushel crop, in the grain alone, that's 9 bushel, or 9 pounds. You go to 75 bushel, that's 14 pounds of sulfur that's needed. We get less than 3 or 4 pounds. Okay? Where else do you get sulfur from if it's not from the atmosphere?
Organic matter.
Organic matter, the soil, right? So then you say, okay, I've got a coarse texture soil, I've got 2% organic matter, or you got, I got 3% or 4%, right? There's some differences there. All right, in total, a 75 bushel crop needs 26 pounds, all right? So I can make a case pretty quick. I could sell a lot of sulfur in a hurry to go through this. Oh, we only get 4 pounds, we need 26, and there's only 2% organic matter. I could sell a lot of it. That's not my job. My job is to kind of work through, okay, when do we still need to look at it differently? Okay, so that's what I want to walk you through. Some sulfur deficient situations, and then situations that we've created. There are opportunities if you really think about it, and I want to share it in that way. Okay? All right, so I think even on this, you can see my checkerboard pattern, right? These are soybeans. Please nod your head and you can see highlighter green soybeans across there, right? So good. You never know in a talk here in the shed. But this is going to be your classic. This is my classic sulfur deficiency. Whenever we have this checkerboard showing up. So it's going to be the coarse textured soil. So sandy loams, loamy sands, usually organic matter less than 2%. Okay? This is my sulfur playground. This is in northwest Indiana. We actually run about 2.5% organic matter, a little higher than normal in terms of classic deficiencies. But you can see the pockets that do and those that don't. Look at this big old block off to the right. I mean, there ain't no sulfur there. It's nitrogen deficient. And again, you're like, did he just misspeak? It's sulfur deficient that's affecting nodulation. All right, I want to get some pictures to back up what I talked to many of you guys this morning about. All right, so early on, all right, this is what it looks like. We had field after field of this highlighter green. Sound familiar, right? There's nitrogen deficiency going on. Sometimes it's just a straight variety. Other times until we stumbled across this and have the reference strip that, okay, we got no sulfur and then now we get 20 pounds of sulfur. That sulfur is needed up front, okay? I'm going to hit this again as a cofactor for what? Okay, you guys did listen. Nodulation, right? And then fixation comes after. So then your nitrogen supply. So it's sulfur, then fixation, then nitrogen. All right? So follow that through. That's early on. This really doesn't show up in a major way usually until July. Even though this application is done early on, spring application near planting, ideally, of course, in 4 or 6 weeks, great. Here's what happens at the tail end of the season. If you don't have a good nitrogen supply, that plant is starting to shut down. Bingo, right here. This is September, early September. Leaves are dropping, okay? Senescence, right? You're not holding on the leaves. Guess what they're not doing? They're not harvesting sunlight. They're not transferring those sugars over to the pods. They're dropping. Okay, so you don't have good seed fill. That's a huge play. Versus the one off to the right. But again, hear me, this is a sulfur deficient field. Okay, that we have good leaf retention, good nitrogen content because of fixation. And then we have this major shift. Okay, we have bigger beans. Now, what's going to rule the day? If you turn off dry, you turn off droughty in late August and September, that's still going to rule the day. You're not going to get the full benefit out of it. So that's the part that comes with this. So here's what I'm talking about in terms of nodulation. Switch it a little bit. Untreated control off to the side. You can look at that root system. Is there much nodulation there? Hardly anything. Okay? Versus the gobstoppers. Hopefully that's universal too, right? Gobstoppers, right? So these huge nodules, right? And many of them. Okay? So you're boosting fixation. So then you can boost nitrogen supply. Okay? So here's the take-homes on that, and then I get into some more nuanced, fun things, interactions with like cleaning day, CRI, things like that. Here's my take-home for those that need it. A soluble source, okay, close to planting, usually within 6 weeks is kind of where I've been telling people. Sources and rates, so if we're 15 to 20 pounds of sulfur, that's going to be more than enough. Sources, ammonium sulfate is a nice spot for us, AMS. Mes10, that's Mosaic's product, half of that's elemental, half of that's AMS. Pelletized gypsum, so calcium sulfate. ATS, I hope we can get some better responses. It's decent, but it's sporadic, so I'm just kind of telling you. I think some of the thiazole aspect of that, I don't think it oxidizes fast enough in the way that I've looked at it. I've always planted and then applied these materials right after planting, so I dare say if I put an ATS sprayed 2-3 weeks ahead, it might be a better play. Most growers who are doing this, if they want to play with this, are probably doing an AMS, and they're probably going to do 100 pounds because that's what the applicator can do. That's fine. There's no reason to go that high unless there's a distribution issue, okay? If you look at pelletized gypsum, that's about 115, 120 pounds. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. And again, I'm about just critical thinking and, maybe look at this differently. Take the leaf samples. I believe there's a gentleman that talked about some leaf samples earlier. All right, those are snapshots in time. Take multiple. All right, I took a couple of years as agronomist for North Carolina, given nutrient recommendations from Fraser fir Christmas trees to blueberries to tobacco to peanuts to sage and everything in between. It's a snapshot. It can help give you a guideline. So if you do that, right, you're going to look to close to critical levels, right, whether they're antiquated or not, right, 0.25% sulfur. Is it close to that level? That might be a field that was responsive. That's the most recent mature leaf. Some of those agronomists hand me down, here's the ratio you need to think about. What I was handed down was really more from the corn and the wheat world, is this ratio of nitrogen to sulfur. If we were 20 to 1, we were in balance. My work on the soybean front, actually that number's lower. All right, 18 to 1. And what that really means is that if we have 18 parts to nitrogen to 1 part sulfur, that field needed sulfur to balance it. Okay? That we were in a case where sulfur was not high enough to efficiently use the nitrogen. Okay? Never mind the fixation benefits. Oh, by the way, I haven't put it on the slide here, but sulfur actually helps with micronutrient availability. I believe you talked about manganese earlier, right? That's one it helps with as well. So think about some of those that come into play. Be mindful. If you do play with this one, I have seen some issues whenever we mix it with potash. Because a lot of guys are trying to get out there. I'll just mix it with my potash and good to go. On my lower CEC ground, so 10 CEC or less. I know some like, I wish I had 10 CEC. Others like, oh, that is low. We can see some issues with the chloride. And in particular, what ends up happening is that the chloride's burning the root hairs. That's therefore burning the nodules. And we have a supply issue of nitrogen. Okay, so be mindful of that. I've got plenty of situations where we've blended with AMS, we've blended with these other sulfur sources, no yield response, and then we start teasing them apart, and then we did it by itself, close to planting, and then we got 3 to 4 bushel yield hits from the chloride, from the 0.6. Okay, so be mindful of that. I do like phosphorus ahead, all right, if we're looking at blending. I like phosphorus and a sulfur in a blend more so than I do the potash, okay? I think there's some promise there in terms of phosphorus. What is its purpose? One of its mechanisms is about root development. If I'm trying to boost fixation, right? You're boosting the roots, root hairs, more nodulation. Seems to make sense. And then, oh, by the way, most phosphorus sources also have about 1.5–2% sulfur with it. Whether you knew that or not, you get a little bit of sulfur with most of those fertilizers that have phosphorus. All right, I'm going to switch into the more interesting ones, at least in my opinion, beyond just these sulfur deficient fields, but these timely plantings and these interactions that we can have, okay? So here's a case, all right? Now these situationally deficient, all right? Boy, I got too much to get through in whatever time I got left. All right, these situationally deficient situations, that's, repetitive. Situationally, I don't talk well enough, right? So this is on prairie soil, guys. Now this picture is last year. I think about August 30th. Side by side, this is 3.5%, 4% organic matter soil. Plot on the left, untreated control. Plot on the right, 20 pounds of sulfur up front at planting. Okay, April 18th, planted beans. Okay, This, by all rights, should not be deficient in sulfur. That soil is as black as those tablecloths. Okay? Planted April 18th. What are those soils like? You don't have to live in Indiana to know what those soils are like. They're cold and wet, right? So if you're cold and wet, where do you get sulfur from? Atmosphere and as well as this soil. If microbial activity is limited, cool and wet, guess what we can do? Provide the sulfur to boost the fixation. That's what we've done. Okay, I'll go ahead and give the end story here on this one, because who knows if I have time. Guess the yield level on this untreated control, April 18th, prairie soil. Give me a number, guys, from last year.
52.
52? There is 60? 75? 77 bushel beans, which again, I know, those are sizable. What's the response on the next one? Take a guess. Those were 77 bushel beans, guys. 99, 22 bushel response. Is that every acre? No. But understand the whys. That's what I'm trying to teach you guys today, right? I am not going to get the phone calls from horse like, Shaun, what have you done to me? I've done this enough. Horse has done some. Henry, others have done this up here. But I think you need to at least think it through. There's some opportunities here, I think. Okay? Cool, wet soils, that's one aspect of it. All right, so 2018, I've done this since 2018. I throw 2019 in there just for the fun of it, because my first planting in 2019 was June 11th. Yes, that was my early planting in 2019. That was one of our wettest springs. Guess what? Any of the sulfur treatments we did in 2019 did not work. They were late planted, okay? But even these are not all that early. May 11th, May 12th, May 13th, May 14th. Those are not super early by any means, right? But we don't have pattern tile drainage that's on 20 foot. We're on 60s, and this field needs to have more drainage. So I'm not going to just slap it in the ground either. But the storyline is still pretty interesting. Right, untreated control, we looked at AMS, ATS, calcium sulfate. It is not the fertilizer nitrogen. Hear that, guys. I've got data to back it up. Okay? So 2018, I'm going to step through these a little bit. I like these heat maps because it draws your eyes pretty quick. Okay, 2018, we've got these fertility, and again, they changed a little bit over the years. So the upper set here, untreated control are 62 bushel beans in 2018, planted May 11th. AMS, ATS, they were 7 to 9 bushel response. Okay, you go to those same year, all right, the June 5th, right, the late planting comparison. None of those fertility treatments, no sulfur, no nitrogen, did anything for you. Okay, it is situationally responsive. All right, then we track through 2020, 18 bushel response. We go from 62 bushel beans to 80 bushel beans. Insane. Continue walking across. As you look at this, we've averaged on these timely plantings 8 to 11 bushels with the sulfur treatment on a prairie soil. Then, when you look at the late plantings, we've had no effect. Same exact soil. Okay? When we get later, that soil is warmer, mineralization is occurring, we don't have an issue of a sulfur supply. Okay? So this situationally responsive. Right? So that's one to kind of think through with this time of planting. I made this comment earlier about the 23 season. So if you want to look at leaf samples, our R3 samples were 0.26%. By strictest definition, not deficient. It's close. It is more like, anyone watch Pirates of the Caribbean back in the day, right? They're more like guidelines than rules, right? They get you kind of close, right? This is the idea. The ratio, the nitrogen to sulfur, 19 to 1. We are definitely too much nitrogen to sulfur or too little sulfur to the nitrogen. Versus those that had the sulfur up front, had a nice concentration. We're in more of that 17 to 1 ratio. Okay, so nice ratio, nice comparison. So again, to give you the actual data on that one, I went from 77 bushel beans April 18th. Here's another thing. We've transitioned to this farm, right, wrong, or indifferent, to VT. Okay, vertical till, high-speed disc, right? That's in vogue now, right? Why not do it, right? So we've transitioned. So we've been able to go out in the fields a little bit earlier than I have in the past, right? I'm now April 18th and 23. This year I did April 22nd. So it's a different system, and then trying to manage that. We're putting a little bit more residue in there. You guys were on point with carbon penalty. I think that there's some aspects of that that's coming into play as well as these cool soils. So last year, 77 bushel beans went to 99. Had rain coming in and we couldn't do our ATS sprays. Gypsum got 99, 101. Urea by itself, 40 units of nitrogen. It is not fertilizer nitrogen. Have you heard that message enough yet? It is not fertilizer nitrogen. It is not what's playing the card here. It's the sulfur that's boosting the fixation. Okay? May 12th, which has been kind of my quote timely one in the years before, the 5 years before, and on average, still responded well. 75 bushel beans on untreated control went to 90s. Okay? All right, the ATS, 85, still a good response, but just a touch below. And I think this, again, is where we're applying it after planting. I say if we're 2-3 weeks ahead, have some more time for that thiosol to really oxidize, that might be a nice play. And then, again, urea's not doing anything for us. And then when you go to 7th of June, we're upper 60s, low 70s, no differences. Okay, so that storyline is still maintained. Right, so this interaction with planting date, huge. Okay, there's another one that's been fun to see. All right, we've already gone. It's about seed size, just to kind of put that in perspective. We see increases in seed size with this, right? You have this leaf retention. We're getting, again, the gobstopper beans as well. We got a few more pods, but a lot of it's coming into the seed size that occurs during this R5, R6 point. Okay. Soil conditions early, again, cool, wet, that's going to do that. Anything that's going to be in that cool, wet category is going to be one that I'm like, I wonder if I can boost fixation under that, right? If you got no-till, you got high residue, you got seal rye. Does anyone run seal rye? No, we got some soil and water folks here, right? That idea of, okay, let's bring some more carbon into it to help so we don't have nitrates leaching. Well, that's a challenge and a frustration and a good goal in many ways. So you kind of work through that. There's some opportunities there. Just to put it in context beyond just Indiana, we've done this across the states, and so to prove that we don't see it in every case either, right? I want you to see that. But what's been interesting on this one is, okay, here across the states, we had 12 states, did 26 trials. The ones that are in kind of this yellowish color are responsive. We had 8 out of the 26. Okay, we're responsive. What's interesting on this goes back to we measured fixation. They were on the higher rate, 30 to 89, 90% fixation. Versus the 18 that had no response were lower fixation rates, 10 to 50%. So again, if we're doing a practice to boost fixation, but that soil or that field doesn't use as much from fixation, maybe not the play for us, right? So then we got plenty of those that don't see that response. You think about some of our south, they're at 39, 48%, 17%. There stands a reason why they probably don't get this boost effect, right? That's part of this. But I sliced and diced a little bit more on this one, and I wanted to show you this right quick to give context, right? So here's the non-responsive ones. They average 58 bushels, but as I started looking at our own cooperative data set within the Soybean Agronomist, we had 5 were late planted. What did I just get done talking to you guys about? Timely planting being a big part of this one. 2 have low pH. All right, anyone remember that one? You got to have pH right to have what? If you're in the 5.5s and lower, fixation's junk, right? That stands to reason why we probably only got 20 or 30% fixation on some of those. And then, oh, by the way, we got the other side. We can go too high on pH. I didn't talk about that this morning, right? So all of a sudden, I've explained 5, 2, that's 7, that's 13 of them, of the 18, why they probably didn't respond. Versus now, the other ones, we had average a 6 bushel response. From the Midwest to North, our planting dates were April 29th to May 25th. So on the, again, timely planting side. Okay. All right, I want to at least get through this one because I think it's a fun interaction that we started seeing. All right, so this interaction of intense management in terms of a fungicide, insecticide type sprays. Okay, so the idea is, okay, can we add some more synergies? Not just this one and done, just not the sulfur, not just timely planting. Let's go through this. So we went into this and got, okay, yes, no, and sulfur, and then we brought in this prophylactic application. So we're doing it no matter what, okay? Our 4 sprays, this is going to be that full pod. All right, early years, we had Preaxor in 2019 and 20, went to Revitec in 21 and 22, and so we've done some more years since that. So again, this idea of fast acts, your pyrethroid, and then bringing in your multiple sources of fungicide chemistry, all right? So coming in there prophylactically, a couple different locations. So 2019, all right, what do you notice here? There's no benefit. Let me lay this out a little bit better. So we've got no sulfur column. We've got the 20 pounds of sulfur that was applied after planting. And then you do the matrix here. There's no foliar protection, fungicide alone, insecticide alone, or combination, right? So if you look at this first column, all in red and orange, we were 67 to 68 bushel beans. no benefit out of the foliar protection prophylactically done whatsoever. Okay, look, okay, there's some good storylines there. But then, whenever you look at on this set, all right, sulfur, that didn't do much for us, 2 bushel on its own right, but when we have the sulfur as a base and the foliar protection, now all of a sudden there's some interesting, I call them synergies, some opportunities. So now we have, okay, 7 bushel increases with this combination. I think we're having pod protection from the insects. I go R4. A lot of the industry goes R3. I think there's more play on the R4 sprays personally, so that's why I do that. Maybe a little bit of leaf retention in the fungicide, but I think the leaf retention comes back on the sulfur that's helping with the nitrogen supply. So now all of a sudden you've got a plant that's holding on to the leaves, more nitrogen, and then you're protecting those pods so that you can finish filling those out. All right, so here's that one first start of this storyline. 2020, here's a stop. We don't see any response, okay? But guess what? These were planted June 3rd. Okay, once again, a prairie soil that was planted late probably doesn't need that sulfur, okay? So just kind of back in another point. 21, we go 8 bushel response to the sulfur, all right? And then now we get another 4 to 6 bushel gains in addition to that with the foliar protection. When the foliar protection done by itself, we're 74, 74, 74, right? There's no response. We had this baseline increase, good nitrogen content through fixation boosting, and then now also some foliar protection and pod protection. So then a really interesting storyline to kind of bring those together just to match you up. It hasn't stopped yet, right? We're still getting, oh, there's now 5 bushels. Here's another 5 bushels when we've gained the R4 foliar protection. Okay. With that, high yield considerations, again, timely planting is a part of that. Think about the idea, okay, what are conditions that are limiting sulfur supply? Is there a play there for you? Get out there with that. Some synergies with the foliar protection. I've got plenty more than that, but I'm going to take a moment. Yeah, I'm going to take a moment to answer any questions or anything else. Yeah. So in terms of the fixation, so I think that we get into some of the nodule activity again, the bradyrizobia activity when we get too high. And then I think we get into some of the other nutrient availability issues. Yeah, so that's about the efficacy of the bradyrizobia, what I'm after again. Yep. You guys brought it up. Now, yeah, good. It is the next one. I want you to see this one. You talked about carbon penalty. I want you to see this as well. Again, whether you guys do it or not, but here's another situation where we've induced an opportunity. Hear all these nice, feel like I'm running for office or something, right? So here we have a cereal rye study. We terminated April 18th. The cereal rye is only maybe 14 inches tall, 600 pounds of biomass, hardly anything at all really if you think about it. All right, then we applied a fertilizer May 4th to the 6th. When we planted the soybean, we got a nice 3/4 inch rain. So everything worked in terms of fertility. Nice stand establishment in the yes-nos. And then now we have these soybeans that are this highlighter green, nitrogen deprived, right? This carbon penalty, if you will. Again, my growers don't talk about it in that way, but that's what's going on. I want to buzz through so you can take a picture or whatever on this one. So this is some of the numbers to think about, right? If we've got 3% organic in our soil, we're going to mineralize maybe 2 or 3 pounds of that. Well, that's not all going to be available May 1, June 1. It takes the whole season to get that, right? So again, by rights, we should get there. Carbon to sulfur ratio and the residue, if we're less than 200 to 1, okay, we're mineralizing. It's turning over. Sulfur is available. If we're higher, a lot of us talk about carbon and nitrogen. I'm talking carbon to sulfur. We're over 400 to 1, we're immobilizing that sulfur, okay? Corn stalk ground, we're about 350 to 1 on its own right, okay? Cover crop, because I'm blazing through this, that cover crop that I had was 200 to 1. So you got 350 to 1, another 200 to 1, we've immobilized sulfur, okay? So in that, so you can catch the final storyline, these are not small plots, guys. These are 30 foot by 700 foot long plots. Okay, so it's not just my little microclimate, whatever, right? You have a cereal rye with no fertility added. They're highlighter green. They're nitrogen deprived. But we were able to bring it back, cereal rye with the gypsum. Nice, dark green. They've got the nodulation and fixation coming through. What it came at the end of the day, we got 6.5 bushel yield hit from this year of rye. All right? Stands were fine. It wasn't stand issues or anything else. It was about nitrogen fixation, sulfur deficiency. 6.5 bushel hit, but the fun part of this, we overcame that penalty and yielded the same level, 71 bushel beans, as no cover, as we did with those that got hit. Okay? So, anyway, questions? I know Mo's on the sidelines here, ready to get in there. Yes?
You talked about the layers in the soybean canopy.
Yep. What about the layers in the soybean canopy?
Well, just how would you describe the layers? Like, is it like nodes or group of nodes or leaves or?
In terms of this response on the soil? Okay.
The layers before.
Oh, how many layers of leaves? Okay, okay. So he wanted me to come back to the layers of leaves. So in terms of the number of layers of leaves, I want to be able to have at least 4 layers of leaves per ground area. So right, if you had your notebook there, I want 4 layers of the exact same. That's going to be a nice, efficient plant. We can go upwards of 6 or 7 layers, so almost double, but that's so much biomass that then now we start shading, and we don't get as much sunlight down below. We've got all this biomass to maintain, and then it's not going into the pots. So, have I answered that, and then any other follow-up?
So what do you define as a layer? Like is it a set of nodes?
I follow what you're saying. So, so to clarify, right, we can take a number of plants in an area, and we'll take all those, and essentially you're just running them through a scanner. Quite literally is what we're doing, right? And so it's not necessarily, oh, nodes 1 to 6 need to be this, and nodes 7 to 14 need to be this. Just overall in that area, all those plants and all those leaf material, right, I need 4 layers of that in total. Because not every leaf is going to be right on top of each other, right? There are going to be some that are partials, but on the average, that's what we're looking at. And I can talk more specifics with you later, too, if that works. Okay. No, I think you're coming up. Any other questions? Okay, I appreciate your time.